Welcome to the Midday Mug Up film talk that we're having with Alastair Cole, who is the director of the film Iorram, which am I pronouncing
You're doing well, Iorram.
All right, cool.
There's always discussion between the islands of how you say it correctly, but Iorram is working well.
All right, cool. It might be a question for later on in that case. So we're screening the film tonight at 7 p.m. at the Criterion Theater, which is 684 Purchase Street in New Bedford. If anybody would like to attend, tickets are free. But right now we're going to spend a little time talking to Alastair. So he is the director, producer, and cinematographer of the film. He is an award-winning Edinburgh-based documentary filmmaker. He's originally from New Zealand. Iorram continues his filmmaking about the often subtle, intimate, and increasingly political dynamics of language and society. His previous films include the feature documentary Colors of the Alphabet and three other short documentaries. Colors of the Alphabet was released at the 2016 Glasgow Film Festival and went on screen to more than 40 international film festivals. It was broadcast in 30 languages across 52 countries internationally, as well as it winning multiple awards, including a nomination for a Grierson Award in 2016, which this is not Alastair's first rodeo. His previous short films have been broadcast in 27 countries and screened at more than 50 festivals around the world, including Cannes Critics Week in 2011 and 2012. And then finally, Alastair is a lecturer in film practice at Newcastle University. So he has been.
Thank you.
So do you want to take it away?
We're in the same room, so there's that echo thing. My name is Laura Orleans. For anybody who doesn't know me, I'm the executive director of the New Bedford Fishing Heritage Center, and I'm really excited about this. A friend of mine, colleague of mine, alerted me to this film. I want to say it's been a year and a half, maybe. Shortly after it came out, it was reviewed in The Guardian, and it is sort of a folklorist dream. It's a film that just has so much really interesting content. And so I'm excited that we have the opportunity to hear from Alastair. And I had the chance to watch the film last night for the first time. And for those of you who are going to be joining us tonight, you're in for a real treat. So Alastair, if you could just tell us a little bit about how you came to make the film, that would be a great way to start off.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. It's lovely to talk across the Atlantic. The film started from a curiosity of mine about language as well. I live in Edinburgh. I've lived here for 15 years. For those of you tuning in, I'm clearly not Scottish. I was born in New Zealand, but my fascination with language and society sort of also has taken me around the world making films, but the context of the Gaelic language in Scotland is a really interesting one. It's an incredibly old language, 1,500 years plus it's been spoken on in the UK, and its ongoing presence has really shifted in a huge way to be concentrated in the islands of the Outer Hebrides and parts of the Highlands and Islands as well. But I was working with a colleague called Magnus Kors, who's the University of Edinburgh, and he, is a linguistic anthropologist and was exploring this relationship with fishing and the Gaelic language. And he told me about this work that he was doing. What his work was really traditional anthropological ethnographic study of sort of talking and watching. But what he was seeing was that the fishing community was really one of the last repositories, or the key repositories of the language. And this relationship sort of played out that without the synergy between them, and that without the fishing industry, the Gaelic language was really likely to completely die off. And also at the same time, the Gaelic, partly because the fishing world was one of the last places where it was spoken today in a work context. So you had intergenerational language and sharing of the language and use of the language. So it created a really interesting context. And then we were talking and chatting. We actually made a short film together that was very much about this, to say, listen, when we're talking about fishing and economics and numbers and these things, we've really got to also consider the language and consider the cultural and linguistic heritage and history that is tied up within the fishing industry. So that was a real call out to the Scottish government, and it was following in the footsteps of Ireland. Ireland's a really wonderful example where in the marine policy there's 10 pages about the Irish language, where it has to be considered, but in Scotland there's nothing. So we made a short film, and it was talking to the fishermen themselves. So a Gaelic short film that was broadcast on Gaelic television, but part of my interest in the project was also to create something bigger and for a wider audience. Because there's a limited amount you can do with a short film sometimes, just in scope, and it can be very impactful, and you can have conversations afterwards. But really, we wanted to tap into a wider public discussion around the current status of Gaelic, but also fishing, which is, both of them are very political hot potatoes, if you want, in Scotland, as I'm sure they are in a lot of other parts of the world, and minority languages and fishing in this relationship. So that's where it started. And really, I discovered this. Well, I mean, I discovered it's known across the Gael Duct and the Gaelic speakers in a huge way. This remarkable repository of archive, of sound archive, that is sitting in the University of Edinburgh in the basements, and it had just been recently digitalized, and it's huge. We had access to 30,000 audio clips. And from this point, I asked myself a creative question with Magnus as well, who continues on as co-director of the film, co-producer, of the film. And he, we said, what would happen if you made a film entirely with sound archive and entirely in contemporary visuals? And was this possibly a bit of an unexplored way of tying the past to the present? And so we started with this point of this quite political point around the importance of the fishing industry for the Gaelic language, and vice versa, and then shifted also to this creative question around sound archive and what could be done. And really, it came at the back of the real influx of beautiful visual archive films that have happened over the last 5 or 10 years. Really amazing documentaries that treat visual archive very creatively. But for me, I was wondering if you could do that with sound archive, and is there opportunities for poetic creative documentary to be made through sound archive? And that was the starting point. It was a big starting point, but it created a big journey ahead of us. I think you're muted there.
Thank you. I'm sorry. For those who, I'm assuming that most of the people on this call have not yet seen the film. I think maybe we should take a step back and just, so in case you haven't done a lot of reading up on the film, the sound, do you want to just very explicitly?
Yeah, I'll explain. Yeah, exactly. So what the nature of this project was that we had access to the sound archive, and finally the film itself that you see is entirely sound archive. So everything you hear is recorded from the late 30s to the sort of 60s. And it was recorded by a kind of intrepid group of ethnographers that were heading to the Outer Hebrides. And they were really keen on capturing language, but also the oral history and folklore. And as anthropologists did at the time, they grabbed sound equipment because it was sort of suddenly became mobile. Sound equipment before that was not mobile at all. It got mobile a long time after filming equipment. So you used to have a big truck to record these things, but suddenly it became mobile, and they traveled to the islands and just recorded it. And a lot of them really long form interviews, really incredible insights and song as well. So that's what you hear in the film. It's there's over 100 voices in the film, I think, and a huge amount of audio. Like I said, we had access to 30,000 clips of audio, so it was a really extensive archive. But then the creative side of it for us was to tie that oral history and the archive to the contemporary world, where I filmed for 3 years in the fishing communities of the Outer Hebrides, and filmed on the boats and were on land, and really tried to create a visual portrait of the community. And then we stitched that together over a long edit and tried to find links between the material I'd filmed, or would go up and film specific material for various stories and pieces of archive that we were planning on using.
Can you talk a little bit about what it was like to film in such a remote location, and how you built trust within that very tight-knit community? I
don't know. I think when you're a New Zealander, the idea of remoteness is quite relative. So I think for me, the Outer Hebrides is still Europe. It's very close. But you can fly to Benbecula or Butter and get there and back in a day. It's very possible. But of course, it is very different to the rest of the UK. It's a very beautiful part of the UK. It is an island between mainland Scotland and Iceland, so it also has its weather temporal challenges. But it's like I mentioned, it's really the seat of Gaeldom today and the centre of the language, and that also creates a wonderful cultural and linguistic context to explore. And the fishing community is still at the heart of industry there, and tourism and fishing is sort of the heart of things, and that, I think, through Magnus's help, we were able to connect with that. But I think because the aim of the film was also to highlight this, what is an important aspect for most of the islanders working there, about preserving the fishing industry and preserving the Gaelic language and culture, we were able to get people on board. And we worked with the Western Isles Fishing Association. It was a kind of collective of fishermen, and they were able to help get me on boats. But on the whole, fishermen spend a long day in the water. They're always up for someone to chat to, so they were keen to get me on board, and it was fun for me. Scotland's a wonderfully welcoming place, and I think, like I mentioned, it's when you're a filmmaker, getting access is everything. But I think when you're making a film that also is supported by the community and speaks to what they're passionate about, and you're passionate about it, and I was able to share stories. I was often telling them what the archive I was hearing, and they would sort of tell me their versions of it. I mean, I think as a folklorist, you might relate to this, but one of the funny elements was that I would tell them stories, some of the young fishermen as well, and they would know versions of it. And I would say, oh yeah, I definitely know that one. I've heard about that accident. I've heard about that story. But then they'd say, but of course, the version of the archive is the clean version. That's the one they told the recordists, So then they would tell me the other version of things, which of course half the time couldn't be recorded. But but it was
that.
Yeah. But of course, I mean, that's one of the wonderful things about working with Sound Archive. It's they're very much tied to the politics and how they were recorded at the time. So yeah, I mean, it was a wonderful time. I spent like best part of 3 years going back and forth from Edinburgh to the islands. I would sort of go up for some specific film shoots, but often also go up for 5 or 7 days and film where I could and what I could. And often with the nature of the islands, you would have to cover a whole island over a week and go back and pick up things and then move to Uist or because it was really about the islands as a whole, it was also about covering all of them. And we were fairly careful with if we had stories from Lewis or North Uist or Harris, then we were trying to tie visually to that as well. So we had to have a lot of coverage in that sense, which was fun. I got to travel a lot and film, meet some great folks.
And I'm assuming that you've screened the film on the islands.
Oh yeah, no, a lot. So the release has been we launched this film literally in the middle of the pandemic at potentially the worst possible time, but it turned out to be brilliant in a way, because the film was made with the support of BBC here in the UK. But as with any film, it was made for cinema. This film, it was the first theatrical documentary entirely in Scottish Gaelic, so the goal of getting it to cinemas first was important. The Edinburgh Film Festival got cancelled in 2020. It was meant to go. The Glasgow Film Festival went ahead in 2021. That was where it premiered, but we already had BBC Alpa, the Gaelic channel, had a screening date. So we very cheekily and sneakily were able to almost do what we called a cast and crew screening, because it went out in Gaelic first before anyone into the islands, and we were able to tell everyone to see it before, and it was free to wear, but it wasn't a version. It was a bit different to the cinema version. So then we went and launched it at the Glasgow Film Festival for the rest of Scotland, and then it went back to the islands in a big way. So there's a wonderful cinema truck that travels around the Highlands and Islands of Scotland, which is like a transformer. It's called the Screen Machine, and it drives around and it transforms into a very cool 80-seater cinema. And that summer, after we did a sort of big virtual release, because we had to, cinemas were closed, it went back into physical cinemas and screened all around the islands. I think it's had about 20, 25 cinema screenings in the islands, which, considering there's one cinema in Stornoway, it's done very well. We had outdoor screenings up in Lewis, and it's been very welcome, which has been wonderful for me. It's always the most nervous screenings, when the film's going out and you're sitting there waiting for the fishermen and the families of the voices involved to watch it, and you're sitting on WhatsApp waiting for their response. It's quite nerve-wracking. But this was a real celebration, and we were fortunately the lack of, we had a general cinema release in the UK literally on the day when every single cinema was closed, but we were able to use that to go onto what you call a TVOD system, a ticketed video on demand system, which was actually really great for this film, because there's a lot of people that were interested but that wouldn't have gone to the cinema because of fear, and no matter when it was in 2021, it just wasn't possible. So we had a really wonderful response in Scotland and in England actually as well, in Ireland and Canada. We've had a theatrical release in Canada and festivals there, and where there's obviously a Gaelic community up in Nova Scotia as well. So, you know, it's been a big ride, but it's wonderful. We really wanted the film to continue to travel to fishing communities, especially where there's this connection. We've had really great, interesting conversations in Brittany and Estonia and Galicia, and places where there's a context of real fishing heritage that can be explored, and oral history that's there. So it's wonderful to be there tonight in a way, because it really is a similar context.
Yeah, I mean, I think that anyone from any fishing community is going to see themselves and hear themselves to some extent, I think. So I'm curious how much the contemporary fishing community did sort of recognize itself in the voices, you know, because obviously part of what you were trying to do, I think, was to make the linkages.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there was parallels. There's really interesting parallels that you often had to take slight leaps of. You know, a lot of the material was recorded in the 40s and was talking about herring fishing, for instance. Herring's obviously all finished, but what we tried to do with the film, you know, maybe very subtly, but was to link prawn fishing today to herring fishing, which is really treated in the same way in the islands. It is the rush that's been on for 5, 10, 20 years in the islands now. It's the key industry for trawling, and what's in the Minch anyway, and the prawn beds in a way, and the industry that's there is in a similar way the herring work is done today. So often where we had audio archive of wonderful, you know, the females that were working the herring all around Scotland, we were able to link that visually to the processing plants of Stornoway and in Uist, where predominantly it's still a lot of women that are working there predominantly, and a lot of them are wives and partners of the fishermen. And those leaps, you know, once we did it enough in the film, we weren't spelling anything out, we weren't screaming it, but we wanted people to connect that actually this is, you know, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does definitely have a long history, and we're just another part of it today. And then the other element was things like songs are still there, and the stories were still there, and the versions, like I mentioned, the versions of the stories, the folklore, are still well known, and that was wonderful, and you know, a bit of a surprise, but a lovely surprise for me when I would tell fishermen about something I heard, and they would say, yeah, we know this version and this version, which is very reassuring in a way to be reminded that oral history continues today. It gets handed down. It doesn't. We may live in a social media world, but it's actually, you know, the idea of the Cayley and the Hebrides is very strong, and that's about sharing stories and sharing histories and sharing songs, and that's definitely not gone anywhere here in Scotland. And I think that was a very positive realization for me.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a very interesting choice. We talked for a few minutes right before everybody jumped on the call here about the choice to really limit the amount of, I mean, there are no other voices other than the voices from the archive. So it's not that you hear a narrator explaining something to you. Or
there's actually one. So you hear towards the end, if you're watching it tonight, we kept one of the trawler captains in, but it's often missed because we did want to make a point, because people, at the end, there's a wee moment. So keep your ears out.
Okay, we'll do that. But I think the idea of sort of not framing and not explaining too much, and really leaving the audience to have their own discovery and make their own conclusions is an interesting choice, and one that I tend to align with.
And it's a cinematic choice as well. And I think it's about the grammar. Maybe film was very much made for cinema in that regards. Television has different grammar in a way that you do need to explain things, because you need to move quite quickly in an edit. The editor we use, we're really lucky with the editor in this film, an editor called Colin Money, whose children go to Gaelic education and who is very interested in this world, but is actually, you know, a pretty high-end fiction editor as well, does big budget fiction stuff. But he was very keen and fortunately keen to work on this, and I'd worked on it with another film as well. So, but what he brought was also the cinematic sensibility, and you know, what we did have to do in the international version is give the context of the Gaelic language, and that this has been spoken for this long. But in Scotland, we don't have that. In Scotland, we don't give anything, and you just go underwater, and then there's Sorley MacLean's voice, who everyone in Scotland is one of the most well-known Gaelic poets, and the people know his voice, and so you have a different sensibility, so that you have to be aware as a filmmaker of people's understanding. And we don't need to tell anyone in Scotland that Gaelic's been spoken in the Outer Hebrides, that where the Outer Hebrides are, but of course, we can't ask that much of audiences everywhere in the world, and it's screening in Darwin in New Zealand at the moment. We don't want to ask too much of them. So you can give people help, but at the same time, we wanted the archive. We felt that the archive we could treat it in a way that would explain that without and ambiguity is our friend. We didn't want to be scared of ambiguity. We wanted people to be lost in the archive for a while as well. And I think cinematically it lets you sink into it. But we did make sure, there's some great moments near the start that were very consciously put there to have people maybe, when things were recorded, because it was very much in the 40s and 50s that these recordings were made. And you obviously find out later on. But I think it's an interesting question about how much you offer up an audience and how much you just want to let them enjoy it, because I think we want to use cinema for that reason and to enjoy the stories. And, I think when we're sitting in a Cayley house or we're hearing oral histories, we don't get told when the story was from. We don't get, that idea of a storytelling world is what we really wanted to bring out as well.
And stories can be timeless,
And they are. And I think this is the other thing we realized, which is really fun and also just not specific to places. The stories in this film that we've had audiences in Estonia and Italy and France tell us their version of that same story. And of course, this, the tropes of folklore and of stories are similar internationally. And that's wonderful and really interesting. And, it cracks open a whole nother discussion around that. But we did one of our big themes, we work this edit and the structure around themes, and there's some things obviously really specific to fishing and really specific to the islands and very, hard to hear heavy stories about death and accidents. But at the same time, there was moments of absolute, humor and joy that we needed to have in there, because, storytelling and oral history has all these shades to it.
And there's a lot of kind of magic and mystery and mythology, there's sort of, and I think, in a world like fishing where things are so much not in our control. I mean, the weather, you can't control the weather. You don't know what's going to happen when you leave the dock necessarily. You don't know if you're going to find fish or how much fish and all of that. So, having superstitions and things that kind of create some structure or some sense of control.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it's about. But at the same time, it was about not judging that as well. I mean, I think just putting it out there, and I think we had interesting decisions around the visual side of that, and how do you position these superstitions and this discussion of fairies and discussion of, crab witches that steal cows and these things that we had in the film. And they were wonderful stories, and they're an absolute integral part of the language and culture. And what was wonderful for me was that the ethnographers in the 40s were asking the same questions that people are asked today, and they'll be like, do you believe in fairies? And you'll get the same answers. One guy will be like, yeah, one will be like, no, yeah. And that ambiguity is wonderful, and they know, the Gaelic speakers knew exactly what's going on. But there is a seriousness to it, and it does provide a really wonderful, important link to the past and to traditional belief, and it's to be celebrated, and it's to be enjoyed for all its parts. And we shifted the visuals very much underwater in these times. We used the mystery of underwater, and we had a wonderful underwater cinematographer attached to the film.
Yeah, the underwater photography is beautiful.
Yeah, she was brilliant, a woman called Lindsay Brown. And there's an element of the mystery that the underwater that is still there today, the mystery of the sea and the mystery of what's going on. That we can have all the sonar and radar to know what's down there, but there's a lot more to it than we. And
I mean, for us in our port, because fishing is offshore and people are sort of gone, the whole thing is mysterious unless you're in a fishing family or unless you work in the industry.
We felt that a lot that distance between a lot of the, especially with the songs. So a lot of the songs were sung from the perspective of a wife left at home, a sister left at home, a mother left at home, and all the stories were in. And you still feel that today in the islands. Often there's plenty of crofts and houses up there today that were built a long time ago, but the windows don't face the sea, because there is this kind of antagonism with the sea that the sea also took their husbands and brothers and fathers. So there is a real, a conflicting relationship with it, but it obviously gave money and life sources and food. But the songs themselves are really wonderful, and I think the songs are often, some of them were still known fairly widely that were used, but these were recordings in kitchens in Butter in the 50s, and they were dialectic versions of that people hadn't heard. They hadn't heard those words with it before. They knew the two. So that was great. We had a really cool song consultant who knew this world really brilliantly, and he helped us navigate this. But there were so many songs. We would often find one song we wanted, and there'll be 6 versions of it for 6 different singers in the archive. So we'd sort of be choosing not really for the best singer, but for the most heartfelt moments. But for me, often that distance and that pain came through the way it was sung, and a lot of them were about loss, and they stretch back a long time, but I think they could be sung today quite often. And while we were there, it's still such a dangerous profession in Scotland anyway. And while I was filming, I filmed over 3 years, and there was a good handful of accidents and deaths up there, and that's really hard to, while you're filming, you suddenly realize how much they affect the community and how much they resonate with the whole island community, the fishing community especially. And but the way people talked about those accidents when I was there was very much the same as what you were hearing in the archive from 70 years ago that were talking about accidents from 120 years ago.
Yeah. And I think, that's sort of what I took away, not to give too much away, but there's sort of sometimes this jarring juxtaposition of contemporary and historic sometimes, but for the most part, there's also a real sense of continuity, that as much as things have changed and modernized, and you see like Coast Guard, or I don't remember if that's what the name is in Scotland, but which is so much more sort of technologically advanced than what it was back in the old days, and still people die and get hurt. And
totally, and the Coast Guard was key to that. And we film with them, you'll see it in the film, and the boats are like Formula One cars, they're unbelievably, and we wanted to show that because in a way, we cheekily wanted them to be the fairies of today as well. They are the, they do an incredible job and part of this community. And there was there's a wonderful side to it that in Bada anyway, the coxswain of the lifeguard boat was always a Gaelic speaker, basically, because they couldn't, if a Gaelic fisherman got in trouble, they could get them to where they are 10 times as fast in Gaelic, because the place names are all in Gaelic. They could navigate it so quickly. So these elements still carry on today, and that tie between the language and how people are living and operating today is very strong. And and I mean, it's interesting you mentioned about the links between the visuals, because it's a 96-minute film, and there's a lot of different ways we had to navigate this. And we sort of had a bit of audio. We cut the film audio wise first, and then started working with visuals. But all the time we had specific scenes that we knew would go with certain things, but sometimes it was very unexpected, and sometimes there was an element of alchemy to making things work. And we had moments that were very beautiful that we couldn't use because they weren't really talking to each other. But there was a third element to all of this, and that was the music. And so the music, which was scored by Aidan O'Rourke, who is a wonderful Scottish musician who plays with a band called Lau. If anyone likes his music, check him out, and also the band. But their music is very much about bringing the traditions of Scottish music into a contemporary world and format, and very processed quite often and electronic at times. But it was very cinematic for me, and he was brilliant. And what his music, I felt we wanted to do was also provide sometimes the kind of final element of the conversation to tie things together emotionally if need be, or supporting it. So
yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because I had wanted to call that out too.
The score is on Spotify and these things, I think, in the States as well. They put the score out as a whole album. So if you really like it, go have a listen afterwards and sit down and get lost in.
So maybe we should open it up. I know that, I'm thinking nobody has seen the film. Correct me if I'm wrong. Before we do that, I did want to just say, for those who are in the New Bedford area, we want you to come tonight. If you're not able to come because you can't come, or because you're in another country, another state, are there ways for people to see the film, you know, as a streaming thing or to purchase a
Yes,
DVD?
yes. Just, I mean, drop us a line through Iorram Film. There's a contact line there. We can figure something out for you individually. It's due to be. I mean, it is in the UK. It is on. It's on a number of platforms, but in the States, I think at the moment it's not, because we have a, you know, a sales agent there, so they're navigating that at the moment. Where that's going to go. But it's sort of a to be seen. But just drop me a line. We can figure something out.
That's great. So are there any questions from those of you who have joined us today? I have to wait to see the film. I know that I have a couple of colleagues from the folklore world who are listening in. I don't know if they might have questions. It's a wonderful, you know, different approach to incorporating these ethnographies, and it almost made me wonder, is there going to be a sequel where you take the old the old pictures, the old images, and combine them with contemporary, you know, I don't know, did you do any contemporary
No,
interviews?
I think it's to be done. I mean, I think the links between, we did them originally, so the original the underpinning film was with the Voice of the Fisherman Today, and we know we did long interviews with them, but as I mentioned, it was a bit more political and about the importance of the language today, and we wrote a lot about that. There's articles, I think, linked to the website, and I've also written academically about the process of this. If anyone's interested, there's sort of journal articles around. But I mean, I think the reverse would absolutely work, because it's about this positioning things historically in the present, and I think that's often the danger with documentary films. It's often very hard to talk about the past, because you either have someone telling you what happened, or you use visual archive, which needs to be contextualized or elsewhere. But then it's sort of, I don't know, I think this was a different way to do it, and I think sound acts in a very different way to it for our imaginations. But we ask a lot of the audience to sort of lead with their ears. But as far as, you know, follow-ups, I'm very interested in, I'm got a couple of new features in development with using sound archive. So one in New Zealand and one in Italy, and we're really interested in continuing to explore this use of sound archive in creative ways, because I think it's fascinating for me. I like it, but I also think it does crack open a discussion around sound archive more broadly, that there are these incredible repositories globally that sort of over the last 10 or 15 years have been starting to get digitalized. And in Scotland, it's happened recently. In New Zealand, it's sort of happened recently as well. And it has opened up a whole fascinating world, especially the majority of them were recorded in the sort of 40s and 50s. There was just a massive rush of audio recording because the technology became available. So I think that creatively there's an opportunity to highlight these parts of history. And a lot of them are sitting in incredible websites and that are there to explore. So they're always worth searching, but also there's equally a lot in sort of hidden behind things and harder to access. But I think it's like visual archive is becoming part of, you know, an important part of us understanding our past. I think these recordings in the 50s and 60s, like in the case of these recordings, they were literally the first recordings of the Gaelic language, of these stories. Often the first time these things would have been ever captured after 1,500 years of being passed down, suddenly they were put on tape. And that in itself is very significant, I think. And yes, we need to remember they're still alive today, but I think the fact that there was this rush in the digitalization opens up some really fascinating opportunities.
So I see a question in the chat. Hold on just a second. This is from Lynn Williamson, who's an anthropologist, folklorist in Connecticut. And she says, were there any issues with the archival materials in terms of permissions or with the contemporary participants? She spent a summer working in I don't know how you say it, Northwest?
Northwest, yeah.
Yep. And remember that some folks were sensitive about stories around seals, for example. She was young and made some faux pas asking too many questions at the time.
I'm sure you're not alone there, Lynn. Yeah, look, it was a big part of this project was navigating the ethics of this. I think I was lucky and am lucky that I'm positioned in academia with this is a practice-based research project. For those that are in that world, they will understand. And, you know, I lecture in film practice, but I was working along, and my background's anthropology as well, and linguistic anthropology. And the film is for the wider world, and like I mentioned, BBC and festivals and cinemas, but it was also framed and developed in an academic context, and that was an important aspect of it from the very start. So with all the voices, we work with the archive. Obviously, the archive themselves have a really rigorous way of navigating the material. They collected originally in the 40s with permissions and whatnot, but at the same time, those only go so far. They had kept quite a lot of the next of kin, but we reached out to every single next of kin, contacted every single next of kin. Anyone that's in the film was permission was resought and gained. So we went through this in a really rigorous way, and that was a massive project, and we really fortuitously literally got all that done about the week before everything locked down, which was lucky. But what it did, which was wonderful, was open up. We already were hugely in touch with the fishing community. They had been really supportive for 2 or 3 years while I was filming, but reaching the next of kin, of course, the Hebrides is a small place. It was tough, but it wasn't that tough because family stay and these things. I mean, there was a moment where I was looking for one final permission for the next of kin. That was and I said to my soundman, who was from Butter, and he was working in Glasgow, and he was a Gaelic speaker. I said, look, we're trying to find this person, John McKinnon's nephew. And he said, oh God, sorry, that's me. You guys have been emailing me. I forgot to reply to you. And he was the person we were waiting for, and the whole time he was working on the film, but I'd forgotten. So the community was very small, and we were able to navigate this quite well. But it did mean that we were able to reach out and build an audience that way as well, and let people know about the project, and to feed back on it, and to keep conversations going. So there was a lot of people that have a massive vested interest in it, from the people that recorded the material to the ongoing, all the media community, the Gaelic media community, do a wonderful job and with BBC Alpa and other groups, and we were trying to work with them all the time. And so the permissions were, it was very tightly controlled and an important part of it, but it was also a really practically useful part to get feedback and to get an audience growing as well. And I suppose the archive materials, because they'd already been recorded and cleared, as far as what was able to be the more sensitive material, there was no, BBC are very rigorous with this as well. And actually the visual material was slightly more tricky, because there was, for instance, material of underwater shipwrecks and these things that becomes an issue if anyone passed away and these things, but they hadn't. We used strategic shipwrecks for that, but that's where you maybe get more problems. But as I said, as we weren't doing the recording, they had gone through a number of different checks, but people knew very much every single voice in the film has passed away. This is the other thing that's we've got to keep in mind. So you were always dealing with the next of kin.
Did anybody else have a question? I can jump in again. Go ahead, Madeline. Don't forget to unmute though.
I was looking for the mute. This is fascinating, and I'd love to see the film. Unfortunately, I'm in Newton, which is an hour away.
Okay.
Normally wouldn't be a problem, but just
drop me a line. We can sort something.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. But what kept striking me is this could be a whole career path for you. You could go around to fishing communities all over the place. I did field work in Africa in 1981, and then I had an occasion to go back 30 years later, and it was fascinating to see what had changed and what hadn't. And the songs and the music and I wasn't unfortunately fluent in the local language, but my God, if you could get somebody who was and could do some comparisons and follow, that would be just amazing. And one of the things that struck me when I was in Africa is how similar the stories were to stories that I'd heard in Provincetown, Massachusetts, when I was first starting out as a grad student. And there were so many parallels, even though the species being caught and the technology being used was so different. Fishing does have a thread that goes around the world.
Yeah, and we've had some wonderful screenings in Europe, especially that have flagged this up, that have sort of told us their versions of the stories that are in the film, which is, it reminds you it's alive and well, and there's sort of not many situations that can happen, because we've subtitled this film into Spanish, French, and Italian, and so they are hearing it and saying, "Oh, we've got that version, we've got that story," which is, and then of course it's just, I mean, fishermen love watching other fishermen. I think there was a lot of that on the boats as well, but I think that is wonderful. And I also worked in Zambia for a long time and made a film there, and I think the idea of continuing my work through Sound Archive especially is interesting. I mean, I think the fishermen I've got 2 young children, and the fishermen were far too keen to see me, get seasick off the side of the boats to spend my whole life doing it. But I always felt that was half the reason they wanted to get me on board, just to see how long I'd last before I went overboard. But but it was a wonderful community, and I think they're very much, long lasting memories and friends and contacts there. And I'm always really curious. We did a brilliant screening in Darwin recently, and it seems so far away, but again, it's a port town, and there's people are working the sea there, and it's not just even fishing; it is this engagement with the sea more generally, and how we engage with the sea. So, we want the film to continue and to keep speaking to these communities and to people that are maybe not at the sea, that are curious but don't understand the importance of it for coastal towns, and the historic importance that when these decisions are made about marine policy or fishing, which often happens a long way away from there, that there's a lot more to it than just numbers, and there's a lot more to it than just economics and catch and takes and these things. There's real history, livelihoods, people, stories, and culture that stretches a long way back.
Well, that's a pretty encapsulating statement. We could sort of end there. I don't know if anybody else has a question. And then I did want to just give more details about how to see the film tonight. Go ahead, Madeline.
I just have one more.
Yeah, of course.
There's a group called the Too Big to Ignore, which is focused, it's out of Memorial University in Canada, and it focuses on small scale fisheries around the world. And they've had several world congresses. This year, they're going to, because of COVID, they're splitting it up into a number of world congresses, but they're going to be smaller scale. But I think this would be fantastic to show. And
let's tell them about it, and we can.
I will. Yeah.
Well, it's wonderful. Thank you very much. And I mean, I think it's, like I said, it's something that we want to keep. I think it's a film that, films sometimes can have a very short, immediate life, but we would want this film to continue to travel and to be seen, and it should be available very soon in North America to stream. And at these times, we want to keep reaching out to people like yourselves and to tell people about it.
So thank you so much for making the film and for showing up today to help us.
No, of course, and I do hope you all, those of you get to see it, enjoy it, and feel free to let us know what you think. And we're on Twitter and Facebook and these things, and you can contact me directly as well. Don't be shy. You can find me on my university accounts and the film's website and these things.
So Alison can put the film website information in the chat. If you are in the area, the screening is tonight at 7 p.m. at the Zeiterion Performing Arts Center, and that's at 684 Purchase Street in New Bedford. You do need to either show proof of vaccination and a photo ID, or a negative PCR test taken within the last 72 hours. So just bear that in mind. Just on the Scottish theme, I just want to put a plug in. We have a concert coming up a week from Thursday. So that's the 26th with a group called North Sea Gas. I believe there are 3 musicians in the group, and it's basically traditional music from Scotland. They've got many, many albums to their credit. It promises to be a wonderful event. That is a ticketed event. And I think Alison just put the ticket link in the chat as well, if you're interested in attending that. I think we'll leave it at that, was there anything else I wanted to say? After this month, we are super grateful to the Zeiterion Performing Arts Center and Cinema New Bedford for sort of helping host this film. I'm very excited to see this on the big screen. having seen it on my little TV last night. After this month, we will return to our normal venue, which is the National Park Theater. And so stay tuned. That's every third Friday of the month. So this is sort of a one-off, a Tuesday night. It was at the convenience of the Z. But next month, the film screening will be at the National Park, 33 William Street, and we're showing a film called Vanishing Pearls about the impact of the oil spill on an largely African-American oystering community on the Gulf Coast. So that should be a great film as well. So again, thank you so much, Alastair. Please.
Thank you. Thank you all. Enjoy the screening.
Yeah, enjoy the screening. Take a look at the film's website. It's really, really phenomenal work. And I just kudos to you for doing that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Okay.
excellent. Thanks so much for everybody for attending.
Okay.
All right, I think we can sign off.